Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined the Doctor as he travels the Vortex. I've got my maracas and sombrero on for episode 552. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm curious if you have maracas or maracas.
Maracas.
Oh, darn. I was going to shake my maracas. They don't work.
So, something else is offline?
Yeah, exactly. Did you guys do anything this last week?
Ugh, what didn't I do this last week? Another very, very, very busy week. We did introduce Shy to Indiana Jones.
Oh, nice.
And so we started with Raiders, as you do. And she was mostly cool with it. And then I kind of warned her when we got to the one scene in the Well of the Souls. It was like, okay, this might be a little scary. There's going to be some skeletons. And she jumped and freaked out and everything. But I think that was more because I warned her. If I hadn't said anything, she probably would have just taken it in stride and moved on. She was fine with all of that. But when the German mechanic gets propellered and the blood spray goes over the plane's tail, she was like, okay, I think I'm done. And she was like, really? That? Okay. I mean, I'm not judging, but just that of all that, not this, not the snakes, not the okay, whatever. So we were really kind of stressing about, well, do we even bother with Temple of Doom? Because,
no.
Temple of Doom, PG-13, beating hearts on fire, and I'm just like,
yeah.
So
I'd like to know if you'd gotten to the into the Raiders if she'd have handled the face melting all right.
Yeah, and when Mel and I got to that scene, there was a part of my brain going, well, maybe it's a good thing she went to bed early. Parent of the Year award here. But so we decided, well, we'll try it because Corey mentioned that she and Julian, they watched that all the time when they were kids. Temple is their favorite. And then she goes, to be honest, I don't even know that I've ever finished all of the other ones. But I know I've seen Temple hundreds of times. And so we thought, well, we'll start it and kind of see how it goes. And she loved it. Watched the whole thing. Didn't flinch. Did
you try to warn her about anything?
I didn't warn her. And they're chanting and throbbing and the music, and he reaches in and pulls the guy's heart out. And I'm looking at her and not the movie. And her eyes got a little wide, but no more than usual for any exciting movie that she sat through. And just rolled with it, did the whole thing. And then it ended, and she was like, that was good. We watch the next one? Okay. So we did Last Crusade the next day, and she was mostly okay through that one. She fidgeted a little bit, but then got to the end, and when Donovan grows old and falls apart, we had to watch that 4 times. She asked us to back it up and watch it again. And then we watched Crystal Skull the next night.
Was she just trying to figure out how they did it? Or
I'm not quite sure. Maybe I have a special effects nut on my hands. I'm kind of hoping, future movie maker. But we watched Crystal Skull the next night, and she enjoyed that one. I asked her which one her favorite is, and she said Last Crusade. But that might be because of the character Elsa. Not necessarily being Elsa, but there's an Elsa. Right. But now she just really took to Temple, and I have a theory now after talking to Corey and Julian about it. It was like I think what it is Temple of Doom, and I can see this now on the other side of it because now that I'm older, because growing up and watching these things when they came out, I appreciated Temple for what it was, but I never really. It's not my favorite.
Yeah, me too.
And if you're asking me, I will watch Raiders all day, every day before I pop in Temple of Doom. I'm not going to complain if Temple's on, but it's just nowhere near as good a movie as the first one. But I think with kids, because you have Short Round as that gateway character to that they can connect with, who's going on the adventure with Indy, and the fact that other kids are in trouble
Mm-hmm.
and Indy's going to help them, that there's that level of it that works. And then there's this, the thuggy cult is just, they're bad guys. They are just these kind of supernatural, generic bad guys. And kids can glob onto that just as a concept and go, okay, bad. Got it. Versus Raiders, and to a lesser extent Last Crusade, because it's about the Nazis, you almost have to have that historical background to understand why they're bad. And obviously she at 7, she hasn't had that.
That makes
so
sense.
I think that might be the reason for it. So I'd be curious, for those of you that have younger kids, Keith, when you get ready to show them these movies, I will be curious to get your report back and find out what happens. And then we went out and got and saw Elemental yesterday.
How's that?
It's really good. I don't quite understand why it's getting the review bombs, it seems like. I think it's one of Pixar's better ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's sweet and very entertaining, and there's a lot of layers to it that if you started to peel back, there's, allegories to immigrants, and which may be why it's getting the hate mail.
It probably is.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot to it, a lot going on, but it's just a beautiful story, beautifully told. So I enjoyed it.
Keith, what about you?
Not a whole lot. The kids have started soccer. They've had practice last couple of weeks during the week, and then had their first games on Saturday, and they went about how you'd expect a 3 and a 5-year-old soccer games to go, but it was very cute. Liam got into it quite a bit near the end. I was pretty impressed. He played almost the whole game, collided with another kid and got back up and kept playing. Almost made a goal, but then one of his teammates decided he needed the ball instead and stole it from him.
Nothing like getting the ball stolen from your own teammate.
Yep, and getting kicked the opposite direction of the goal while doing so. I swear he was going to get that in there too if it wasn't for that.
Well, that's too bad.
But they're both enjoying it quite a bit. Gemma, I don't think quite as much. She a little more timid, not wanting to get in there and really get involved. Of course, it doesn't help that during the game, a ball jumped up and hit her in the face. So she sat out the rest of the game crying. But she went back to practice this week, and while she's timid about it, she's at least still trying. So that's all I can ask for.
Yeah.
The only other thing I did was I finished Endgame, Doctor Who Endgame. It was okay, but it just needed the Doctor to be actually in it. What about you, Glenn? Did you have a good birthday?
I did. That's pretty much the excitement of my week. I had to work on my birthday, but then we went to, after I got home, the family took me to Wings Etc. for dinner, and then came home and opened present. The kids and Holly got me a trimmer for our back hedges, a longer, more reachable trimmer that I can actually get more done with. And then a cordless hedge trimmer, and then
Nice.
Then we had angel food cake, and that was pretty much it.
Happy belated birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You both wished me happy birthday on my birthday too, so
not on the podcast.
That's right, but now it's official.
You are invited on an adventure across all of time and space. In a completely random order. It's the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. Jump in the TARDIS with your hosts,
Eric Gulbranson,
Asad Kheshki,
and
Matthew Kressel.
Explore Doctor Who TV stories, audio adventures, and books, both novels and non-fiction. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. It's the entire Whoniverse. On shuffle. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a member of the Direction Point Network and is available about once a month wherever you find your podcasts. You are listening to Traveling the Vortex.
We didn't have any news this week. There was something I did, but I was holding on to it because that's going to be this week's Something New 2-minute review. And again, I came unprepared, so let me get my stopwatch ready.
Does anybody actually own a stopwatch?
Not an actual physical one, no.
Not a physical, no.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one on my phone, there's one on my computer.
I heard a thing recently where they talked about the invention of the stopwatch was specifically done for horse races
That didn't
to
surprise
be
me.
able to, get to that specific of a time on them, and it became popular because then everybody could track their horses. That's kind of how that whole industry started, was around the what's the big one?
Churchill Downs.
Sure, we'll go with that one. Not a horse guy. I don't know if you knew that or not. Whichever one just happened recently. That's why I heard that story on the radio.
They've all happened recently.
Well, there you go.
The Triple Crown, I think, just ended. So that's all 3 big ones.
And that's going to do it for our segment of trivia facts that nobody knew you didn't know.
I was stalling so that Glenn could find his stuff.
Okay, I'm good. I'm ready to go. All right. So my something new 2-minute review. We're Falling Through Space, Celebrating Doctor Who and the Mundane by J. David Reed. Now, this came out about the middle of last month, and it's a book that examines the complex concepts of Doctor Who and how they're often relatable to viewers, mostly because they mirror ordinary situations or instances in our own world. And so the first part is about the companions and companionships. Reed uses relationships in the show to illustrate how people need one another in different ways. The next part is all about family and how those relationships shape us and make us who we are. The third segment of the book is about our place in the universe, and Reed uses kind of the multiversal ideas presented in the show to examine some what might have been scenarios or things that could have happened had something changed in our lives, or if we had done something differently. And so he relates things like Father's Day and things like that. In his final section, then he tackles issues about home and personal space. He examines how the space where the companions and even the Doctor are or live is a reflection of their own characters. When he uses mundane in the context, he's referring to mundane things in the personal world examined in grand ways and topics and things in the show. And so that's what he means here about mundane. His writing's filled with genuine love of the show. Book's only about 112 pages long. So it's a really quick read. And I think it'd be accessible to Doctor Who fans and even maybe those that aren't as familiar with the series. So I'd completely recommend it. And it's published by 404 Inc. And that is my something new 2-minute review.
Sounds like an interesting book.
Yeah, I liked it.
They all say, who is Doctor Who?
This is Tim Trelaw.
This is David J. Howe.
I'm Peter Purvis.
I am Sadie Miller.
This is Lauren Cornelius.
Larry, it's Fraser.
For all things in the Doctor Who collecting world and beyond, the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. I'm Larry Van Mersbergen, your host, and I've been collecting for 42 years. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex on the Direction Point Podcast Network.
Hi, I'm Rupert Booth.
I am known as Paul Ferry.
And my name is Barry Williams.
Together, we host Time Ram.
Time Ram's a cruel mistress.
It's a random number generator.
That also.
We roll a number from 1 to 13, and that's our Doctor. Then 1 to 300 for the story, and then we ram them together.
Even if it doesn't make sense.
Cruel, I tell you.
Time Ram, putting the wrong Doctors in the wrong stories, so you don't have to.
You're listening to Traveling the Vortex.
All right, well, I think we're ready for our reviews. So we are delving back into the comic book adventures. We've been sort of quasi-tying into the 60th anniversary with Iron Legion and City of the Damned. And part of that is those don't really connect so much as that they lead linearly into a story that does, which is the Star Beast. But before we get to the Star Beast, there was a short little comic story called Time Slip that we're going to fit in here as well, because it happens just linearly in the magazine. It was printed just before Star Beast, so it doesn't connect in any way other than chronologically. That's where it was released. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to get into the big discussion about the Star Beast, which is actually features Beep the Meep, who will be coming up in the 60th anniversary specials. Keith, do you have probably don't have a synopsis for Time Slip at all, right?
I don't. There's a summary, but not a synopsis, which pretty much just, that's not the same.
Well, who wants to go first on this one?
I liked it.
I thought it was pretty good too. What's interesting is I read it about the same week we listened to Once in Future Past Lives. Mm-hmm. So the premise was very familiar.
That's what I was going to mention, because I did the same thing, because I think you and I sort of went on after we finished City of the Dam and read that.
Yeah,
and,
we did.
Then we were like, okay, well, that's, I think, when we suddenly realized, we should add this in since this does take place here. And I did the same thing. I was reading it right around the same time. And so the regression concept that's in Once in Future is also kind of explored a little bit in this one, which I thought the same thing. I thought, wow, what the serendipity of this.
Yeah, considering this was published how long ago?
Yeah. Although this one, instead of going from presumably 8 back to 4, this one goes from 4 back to 1. So
yeah.
I thought your first mention would be, hey, canines are here.
Well, yeah, there's always that.
Not a lot of canine, but canine's here. So.
He gets treated a little better in this than he does in Star Beast.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Yeah.
More on that later.
Right.
I will say that it was an enjoyable little strip, and suddenly the conversation that you two had made a lot more sense on this side of it.
Oh.
Having now read it.
Right.
It's just more than anything like just a little interlude that puts some peril, but it's just fun.
And I really appreciated the art too, that that one particular photo of Hartnell reaching across the console to do the switch flip, that they turned that into a panel. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Well, I didn't check this out either. Did Gibbons probably didn't do the art for this one, right? Because it's remarkably different.
He did not.
Okay, so that was the one thing that I noticed, is that I wouldn't say it's a jarring change, because the artwork is equally as nice as Gibbons, but you can tell it's two different art styles. Mm-hmm. And I think the doctors in this almost have more of a photo resemblance than what Gibbons gives a more caricature look in the stories that he's drawn.
I suspect it was done at probably a time saver, that because Gibbons was, kind of the main artist for the run at the time, knowing that he was handling these bigger arcs, that they would occasionally assign little one-offs to, this guy or that guy or whatever, so that they still had something they could print while Gibbons was working on the next big chunk of stuff.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. Especially since it is only a 2-issue little quick arc.
Yeah, it's real quick. Well, not much more to say about this one, so let's move into the meat of our reviews, which is that of the Star Beast. We're going to review the comic first, and then we also listen to the Big Finish audio adaptation, Doctor Who and the Star Beast. And we're going to kind of compare and contrast those as we go. I don't know that we need to take them separately unless you guys feel that's necessary, because I think there are a lot of parallels, but then there are, as they did with Iron Legion, sometimes they take a few liberties, mostly to make it work in audio, but also I think to sort of make it work, to balance it a little better with, I don't want to say like modern sensibilities, but maybe just to balance it a little more with what maybe we're more familiar with an audio. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think they also do some of that to make it stretch to the length they need it.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah, although it doesn't seem like they have to cram a lot in.
No, they really don't.
Do it.
They just have to give it a little extra weight to it, a
Yeah.
little more breathing room,
Right.
more than anything.
Right.
Well,
do
the
have
scenes with the factory workers complaining that they just wanted to go back to work, those were expanded out a little bit. A little bit more of Fudge and Sarah going to school, stuff like that. But I mean, again, it's scene setting, so
Yeah.
things that you wouldn't necessarily feel the need to draw in a comic panel.
Did Beep the Meep sort of become a known entity? I think even on the fringe of Doctor Who fandom. I think anybody in fandom maybe has an idea of Beep the Meep. I think anybody in fandom maybe even knows the nature of Beep. But did you guys know that he was going to be this, malicious bad guy before we went to this story? Were you guys aware of that from just kind of peripherally knowing about Beep?
I did not. I saw it televised as I was listening to it, because I wound up listening to this before I read it. But I did not know going into it.
I suspected, mainly because having flipped through the Dave Gibbons collection many times, but having not actually read it, there's that great panel when Meep pulls the gun from a hidden pocket and is screaming "Meep, Meep" and blasting things.
Right.
So I kind of knew he was going to wind up being a bad guy, but it didn't change my enjoyment of the story at all.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere that what's the gal's name? I keep wanting to say Alice, but that's not right.
Sharon.
Sharon, thank you. I did read that this would technically be the first black companion to the Doctor in any media. And that she has that distinction. And this would have been way back in, 1980, I think is when this was printed. Well, maybe, I think it was 80, back in 1980. Certainly the late 70s. So Iron Region was 79. So this probably was 80. 80 had probably rolled around by this time. Because I think it was like February or something of 1980. She gets that distinction of, in any media, being the first black companion to travel with the Doctor. And I say travel with the Doctor because in this one, they do end the story with her, the audio recounting to Fudge her adventures sort of retroactively. Although future to him, they already happened for her because she's left this note not long after I believe she's taken off with the Doctor. But I think that was interesting, or a neat homage that they did that, because in the comics, she actually travels with the Doctor for a while. She becomes a companion. In fact, the next story that follows this, Dogs of Doom or Dogs of War, I can't remember what it's called. Dogs of Doom, I think is what it's called, actually features her as well. So, and then beyond that, I think she even stays with the Doctor for a few more stories in the comics. I thought that was kind of cool that while they couldn't just, I think it was better than just having her get in the TARDIS and take off with him. I think by having her send the letter and kind of show that she's been having further adventures kind of signifies more that she traveled with him rather than leaving it ambiguous that she goes off in the TARDIS. I think the other thing that the audio does, and probably rightfully so, is in the comic, I don't remember this. I don't think she's aged by the black sun energy.
Yeah, there's no reference to that at all.
But she is in the audio, and I think that's good because it does transition us from that awkwardness of she's a schoolgirl running off with an older man. She has essentially aged. I mean, it's kind of fudging it a little bit, but she's essentially aged enough that, she's not going to fit in here, so it makes sense for her to go with the Doctor. I think that kind of gets around the whole idea that he's running off with a 16 or 17-year-old, or even younger. I'm not sure what age they're supposed to be in the story.
Yeah, looking at the comic, they look like they should be quite a bit younger than they seem to be, at least younger than they sound. Although looking at the pictures of the actor who plays Fudge, he looks pretty young.
Well, didn't
not teenager or not like preteen, but young.
Right.
I say, didn't in the audio, wasn't there a drop line about, oh, they'll listen to anything a sophomore tells them?
Maybe, but they wouldn't have used sophomore because they don't.
What? Yeah, it was whatever the.
Yeah, they don't have those levels. She makes the comment that she's still going to have to take her O levels. Now, I get this is in the audio, and again, I think the age, there's an age difference in the audio. I think maybe they were portrayed to be younger in the print version, but I think maybe they were portrayed to be a little older, maybe what we would consider high school age. But I think that she says something to the effect of that she'll still have to come back and take her O levels, and I think your O levels are usually your 12th year of school, your 11th or 12th year of school. So I figure presumably she's close to that if she's making comment of that.
They're like your SATs.
Yeah, exactly. Your O levels are kind of, I think, you do those before you graduate, so they're almost like senior finals. Would probably is the more equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think O levels sort of determine, at least used to determine for them, maybe what profession they might go in, because I think you take I may be speaking out of turn here, but they are out of turn here. But I think that your O levels also can determine you might specialize in a certain thing, so it might also help you determine where you're going to go on later in life, whether you're going to do more of a technical trade or whether you're going to go on and do university. So I think that also plays into it. So it's a little different than it is here, but not too much. Anyway, I'm getting off track for this story. The Warith Warriors, in the print story, they're very much just straightforward, misrepresented aliens until you find out who they are, and that they're sort of the good guys. Sort of, they're this police force trying to bring Beep in, and it's just very straightforward. There's not a lot of comedy there, and I think that was something that I enjoyed about the audio, is that it gives them a little more personality, and it almost gives them a little lighter edge, and so you don't take them as serious in the audio, but I think it really works for the audio, especially since you've got more characters with lines, and part of that being because that gives you a better visualization audibly to let you know what's going on and give you flesh out the story a little more in audio. And so I really appreciated that they kind of took a lighter tone to those characters, especially once we learn who they are, or it's revealed who they are. I think that works better in the audio.
Yeah,
I can buy that.
It does, but it also makes the beginning introduction seem more, while they're comical and a bit idiotic initially, the fact that they still implanted bomb in his stomach seems like such a drastic shift between characterizations.
That's true, but to be fair, they think he's an accomplice.
Oh yeah,
and I think they're more of a Judge Dredd. I think that they're maybe less than Judge Dredd, but they're more of a Judge Dredd where they might also be judge, jury, and executor. But then I suppose that contradicts it, because at the end, the doctor does, in both cases, ask that Beep be, or at least implore that Beep be tried, given a fair hearing. So,
and they do make it clear that he is intended to be captured dead or alive.
Yeah, right.
And it's so they obviously don't care about, side effects or,
right.
collateral damage, as it were.
And not so much, and so much more, or so much less in the end than in the beginning. So yeah, it does kind of change the characterization, as you were saying.
Yeah.
It doesn't keep it consistent anyway. The ant.
But I can't fault the audio for that either, because it's kind of that way in the comic.
Yeah. All right. I said the ant, the mom, the gal that Fudge is with for some reason, and I went back and looked, and I think she's portrayed as his mom as well. But for some reason, when I got to the audio and they were saying it was his mom, I was like, no, it wasn't his mom. He was living with an aunt or something. And I think maybe what I did is I remembered them talking about her being a foster child and she was living with somebody else. So I think maybe I had supplanted that in my head that he was living with a relative. And so it threw me off, but it was the mom. I'm still dropping back and saying aunt just on accident because that was my first impression. But that being said, the gal that plays the mom, Mrs. Higgins, is it Miss Higgins? Yeah. In this, I think it is terrific. she's really kind of that quirky mom that is not quite to the the screamy, scared, gonna take it. She's almost a Jackie to a point. She's not so much obnoxious like Jackie is, but she's not going to take crap from anybody.
She just kind of rolls with it,
right? And it's just even if it's aliens, it's not going to set her back. She's still on her way.
I imagine there was a slice of familiarity there for all of us when he comes home and Meep's out of the closet and mom's there, and it's this, oh God, how much trouble am I in? And instead it's just running a freaking petting zoo, am I? And I suppose we're going to go and do this. And you just kind of get the vibe that as the story goes on, you get more stuff with her that Fudge probably puts her through a lot.
Yeah.
Being a sci-fi fan. Or a sci-fi fan, as they said. She probably is used to weird things coming home, whether it be from the model shop or the comic book store or the. But Mom, I really need this toy. Okay, and she just kind of goes with it. So,
well, considering he's called Fudge, I mean, that should give you enough indication.
Right.
And then there's that.
Right.
So are we going to talk about the Meep in the room?
What's that?
Meep.
Let's talk about the Meep.
Oh, well, I Meep almost is a one-dimensional character. And by that I mean, and maybe it's because I knew that Meep was this malice thing pretending to be this timid space creature, but Meep is this pretending to be a timid space creature that really is the bad guy of the story. And there's not much more to it. Even though they fill us in on the backstory of the Meeps and what happened to them and them absorbing the radiation from the black sun that kind of turns them evil, which I don't know how it works, but okay. Turns their entire race
evil. It also
evil.
allows them to hypnotize people.
Right, right. And
after they've harnessed it.
Well, and that's not touched on in the comic as much. I mean, it is. They are obviously under his control, but it's not. It's almost. In fact, I was kind of glad that the audio conveyed it more. That it was the black sun energy or black star energy that was allowing him to be able to control them. So that worked better as well. But yeah, so we get sort of this backstory on Beep, but Beep's just really this tyrannical thing, and you almost to the point where you gave the backstory so that I'm supposed to have some sympathy because there's this race of Meeps that get corrupted and I should feel bad for him. On the other side, he gives me no reason to feel bad for him because completely this whole time he's trying to manipulate both of these kids. He turns around, tries to manipulate the doctor, and he's trying to manipulate the Warworth warriors as they're hauling him off at the end. So, I mean, it's an interesting character just from visualization and style, but overall,
the dichotomy of something so cute being so evil,
right? But the character's really kind of just one-dimensional.
Yeah, when Sharon, who has been the Meep's advocate so much, at the end screams, "I hate you, you're horrible." It's kind of like, oh yeah, it's a bad character,
right?
Not a good guy. He has no redeeming factors to him whatsoever, even with the backstory they try to put into place.
I think there's an attempt to make Beep more lovable rogue kind of malice versus evil Dalek kind of malice.
I think they attempt that, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly there. I mean, he's like a cat. Anybody who owns cats will tell you, Oh yes, if given the opportunity, they would kill us. That's just what cats do. And apparently there has been quite an extensive amount of scientific study in that because of their relation to the big cats, that house cats are really not all that different in temperament, and that just like a lion or a cougar, if given the opportunity, they would pounce on you and eat your face. But all we do is pick them up and coddle them, and they really can't stand that because we're so much bigger than they are. And that's kind of what Meep is. He's this cute, fuzzy, big-eared, big-eyed. He's cute, and he looks very cuddly, and he can't stand having his ears touched. At least, probably not, because was it just me, or did every time she scratched behind his ears, he let out this cooing noise? And I couldn't determine whether or not he was doing that to keep up the act, or if it was like an auto response that he couldn't quite stop himself from doing it.
Maybe.
But even when he's, even when he's screaming, "I'm going to kill all of you," and it's this high squeaky, And was it just me, or did he become French as the audio went on?
Maybe
it certainly it certainly to me sounded like he was developing a bit of a Monty Python-esque ridiculous French accent as he continued to yell and scream at people, which made it all the funnier, honestly, because now it's, I am Pierre. I release the ducks from Crystal Pond. I mean, it was to that level of pantomime, and just funny to me. Oh no.
No, I didn't really get. Are you back with us, Keith?
I am back now.
I didn't really get that. But maybe if I went back and listened closer, I might have. I don't think the actor or actress, I suppose, strayed much from that. I mean, there's obviously a difference between the cute, cuddly Meep that's trying to get sympathy and the mean, gruff malice of a Meep that we get as well. But I didn't necessarily notice that. One of the things I found interesting, and Sean, is the David Gibbons collection. Is it a reprint of the IDW reprints of the comics? Or do you know? I'm asking because until I read this, I had always visualized the iconic picture of Meep with the gun, and it's got a yellow background, and Meep is completely white. But in this one, IDW, the one at least Keith and I read, because we read the individual comics, the coloration is almost a muted blue, almost a cross between a gray and a blue. And so I thought, okay, so when the comics were printed in Doctor Who magazine, they were black and white. The original comics were black and white. And so I thought, okay, so when they reprinted them for the Marvel release in the 80s that we got, I think maybe on newsstands in the UK, but we definitely got newsstands here in the US, that must have been the colorization for those. He must be white in those. And so I went and looked and found some of those and realized that he's even more blue in those. They realized him as a blue creature, and all of the Meeps is a blue creature.
In this IDW thing, he changes issue to issue.
Well,
the first one he's super dark blue.
Yeah.
And the next one he's really light, almost gray.
Right, yeah.
It's really inconsistent.
You're right, but it's still tones of that. But yes, you're absolutely right. It does change frequently in that. So then I got to digging around, and I found the classic comics that was reprinted in the UK in the 90s, I think it was, where they were reprinting a lot of I think they had like 26 issues of Doctor Who classic comics. And they were reprinting things from everything from TV action to the Daleks installations to the ones of the Pertwee, and I can't remember what the name of those were. Anyway, all of these old comics, and some of them from Doctor Who magazine. Anyway, in that one is where I found the picture that is, I think, most associated with Beep, and they chose to make Beep white in that. So now we've seen the previews for the Star Beast episode that's coming up, and they've chosen to go with the white Meep. So I'm wondering if Russell T. Davis is remembering Meep from the comics, classic comic reprints, as opposed to the original prints, or maybe just because the original in Doctor Who magazine were black and white, and Meep was not shaded, must of course then been white. So I thought it was kind of crazy that I went from this image of white Meep, a snowy white looking Meep, to reading a comic where he's various shades of blue and gray, and then going back and finding that there's another interpretation where he's just dark blue. I say dark blue, it's not dark blue like midnight blue or midnight blue or anything like that. But he's blue. He's much bluer than he is in the IDW.
He's comic blue.
Comic blue. Yeah,
blue.
Superman suit
looks
blue.
like Beast.
Yeah, Beast.
Yeah,
He's Beast blue. Absolutely.
Beast blue.
To finding the actual white colorization that I found that I remember from all the years of seeing this picture of Beep holding the gun. So anyway,
Well, what's also interesting is jumping ahead a few weeks. I've not read it yet, but just clicking into those Wikipedia link on Star Beast 2, the thumbnail has a white Beep.
Oh, okay, all right.
I don't know if that. I'm assuming that's supposed to be Beep. I don't know.
Yeah,
but he's white there, so maybe that's where he's pulling from.
I hope it's Beep.
Also from the continuation.
I hope it's Beep because I've put that in our Adversary Archive episode we're going to do in a few weeks. So.
All right, so the Dave Gibbons collection here, which is released by IDW, makes the comment that Oversized Edition collects all of them for the first time and in full color. So I don't know if they were colored specifically for this collection.
What's the publish date on that? The original publish date.
Let me look that up.
Because I'm wondering maybe if they printed that collection and then reprinted what they had done for that collection in the individual comics. I think the individual comics came out in 2000. I want to say 2007, 2008.
October 2011, first printing.
Okay, so I believe that the run of comics was 2008. Yeah, so they must have done it for the comics first and then put those collected together. I think the first time in color is probably, I think we're reading first time in color. I think we're reading into that. I think they're saying first time collected and comma in color, or comma and in color. Yeah.
Now, I will also say that there's a bit of artistic license going on because in all of the shots throughout this story in the Gibbons collection, Beep is blue. He is Beast blue through all of it. Now, depending on the situation, that blue does change hue.
Yeah.
And in particular, the classic shot of him firing the blaster, I think it's because he's almost kind of a light purple in some ways, but I think it's because I think it's because the blaster is red.
Okay.
And so they've just, illuminated him.
That makes sense.
Okay, that's a good argument.
Well, I'm going to say,
but I haven't got to the white one in the next story. So
I'm going to say, for canon's sake, he's white.
Now, okay, so you mentioned that Russell's going with a white one. I'm having a real Mandela effect here because I could have sworn he was blue in the trailer. You're saying he's white?
He's white. Well, I mean, he's kind of a...
Because I literally remember him as blue from the trailer.
Yeah, he's not definitely.
I was
not
just
blue.
about to pull the trailer up and watch it and go,
definitely
really?
Not blue. No, he's definitely white. And he's kind of a dirty white. He's not a bright white like he is in some of the illustrations of him. But if anything,
so since we're on it,
blue with some gray.
I assume now, after reading this, that what we're going to get a Beep is going to be a retelling of this aspect of the story. What do you guys have thoughts on what he might try to do with Beep in the 60th?
After reading this, I sort of wondered the same thing, but the more that I sat on it, I'm wondering if it's going to be more of a soft reboot of the character, and the Doctor will know that he's encountered Meep before. And so I'm wondering if it's... I mean, they could totally do a Family of Blood thing, which, if you really do some mental gymnastics, they both are considered canon, and both could be considered having had happened in the Doctor's lives. So they may go a route of that. But the more I think about it, I'm with you originally when I read this. I kind of thought, I wonder if they're going to take pages out of this comic for that particular special. But the more I think about it, I think they may use a lot of influence from the story, but I think maybe they will have the 14th Doctor recognize Meep as someone he has encountered in the past. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make sense for the Warith warriors to be after him again. So I suppose in that way, and you're probably right. Maybe they are just going to. This is a first encounter thing in the. Or
maybe the warrior. Maybe he tells the story in a flashback of that first.
Well, that could
encounter.
be too, because we're just seeing glimpses of things.
I will say, I just pulled the trailer up. And in the ET segment where Donna pokes him in the eye,
he's white.
He is definitely white. In my defense, there's a blue fuzzy thing in front of him.
There is, yeah. No, you're right. Now that you say that, I completely remember that. Yeah, because he's kind of in. It's like the ET scene. He's kind of in a bunch of stuffed animals, or at least other plush around him. I don't know, Keith. I suppose in a few months we'll know, but you might be right. They might be pulling a lot of the story from this and just portraying this as a first encounter.
Because it makes me wonder, yeah, there's the fans out there, but you got to imagine the wider populace has no idea who Beep the Meep is.
Well, yeah, but I think...
And the fact that they've never even really addressed the fact that, they've not had any sort of song and dance about the fact that Beep is back. They've not said his name directly.
Well, no, but I think they're being coy by showing clips of him and the Warith robots, Warith warriors, and the titling it the Star Beast, which is problematic, I think, in a way. But I think
that's the other part of it.
I think they're being coy, though.
And there is, in that scene in the closet, there is a black actress in the scene behind Donna.
Well, that's Rose. That'll be the.
Is that Rose? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's Donna's. What is it? Because she's stepsister. Because I think
I haven't read that much into it.
So
I don't
Donna's
know.
mom has remarried, and I believe that's Donna's mom's new husband's daughter, and that's the Rose that they initially announced would be a companion. That we all thought that. Is it Lily? Is that the one that's going to be with Ncuti Gatwa, the 15th Doctor? Anyway, we kind of crossed thinking that we got confused. We thought that Rose was going to be the 15th Doctor's companion, but Rose is actually a companion kind of just for these specials, I believe.
Gotcha.
And rewatching the trailer we got, in between the announcement and the most recent one, looking at these clips, of course my audio is not on, but it certainly looks like Rose is going to be the introduction of Beep and the Doctor back into Donna's lives. So it's all going to kind of, it looks like Rose will almost serve the Sharon's role, and Donna could potentially just be an additional complication there somewhere.
Right. Well, and Donna's fudge.
Yeah, it's to some extent.
Right. No, you may be right. That may be the way they're taking it then. So in that case, it'll be a lot like they did with, I think even Human Nature and what's the second part of that? Family of Blood.
Family of Blood.
I
think there are shades of Human Nature, but there's a lot of similarities. This will probably be the same way.
And it's not even the first time that's happened, because they did it with Jubilee.
Right, with Dalek. Although Dalek and Jubilee, if you sit down and compare there are very few similarities in it. It's really similar in spirit,
different.
and that's all. But yes, you're right. Jubilee is what inspired that, and if you want to be pedantic about it, Victory of the Daleks is Power of the Daleks. That was Mark Gatiss's love letter to Power, because Power was lost, and we didn't even have the reconstruction or the animation at the time, and so he basically rewrote Power as Victory. So it's certainly there's been precedent set already. So,
and what's interesting, this is the first time they've done it with a comic.
Yeah, that's true. Although not the first time that a comic character has been included in a television episode of Doctor Who, because we did get.
I was trying to remember.
We got Absalom Dack in Time Heist.
That was more of a wink and a cameo,
but I'm just saying it's not the
else.
first time that a comic character has been at least acknowledged in the television series.
Yeah.
Reading this makes me a lot more excited to see what they do with Star Beast, because even if it does end up being just a adaptation for television, I still think it'll be a lot of fun, and I think that there's a lot you can do with this guy. I'm going back to it is a very two-dimensional character or one-dimensional character, but I think you can have a lot of fun with that in a 45 to an hour television show. I think you can have a lot of fun with that, especially since they're very, very visually caricatures. I mean, even the shots of the warriors that we get in the TV clips look amazing. I mean, these are things that we haven't seen in Doctor Who on television before, and so I'm really excited to see those visualizations as they play out.
Well, and I think it makes a lot of sense that if they are going to adapt this story, that because it's a comic story as opposed to a novel, there's not quite as much of a story there to adapt unless you're, doing something faithful, which Big Finish has already done. So why do that again?
Yeah.
And having Donna there with the additional baggage of Donna being back with David Tennant as the Doctor, it makes a lot of sense to do a abbreviated adaptation of that story, because it is simple enough and a good enough story that it would be justified doing on television, but not quite enough to really stand on its own as an episode.
That's true. That's a good point.
It's also true that for an anniversary episode, for the general public that does not know who Beep the Meep is, they're just getting, hey, Doctor Who's back, and there's a fuzzy ET thing. For the fans that do know, it's giving us that extra fuel to get excited over and speculate on and be like, oh, they brought in Beep the Meep. That's so it's a very targeted move.
Yeah,
right. I mean, we're doing a whole thing on that now.
I mean, prime example.
Yeah.
And for the record, we did a discussion of Human Nature, the book, versus the episode in our episode 190.
Hey.
And we did Jubilee and Dalek all the way back in 178.
All right.
So for those of you who were interested.
I think I'm 99% in agreement with you guys about this, again, about them taking this as a fresh start and just adapting or utilizing an already established storyline. But to argue for the fact that it could be a continuation of a character and still work for the average viewer, when most viewers went into the first episode of the new series back in 2005, we had Autons in the Nestine Consciousness without having to even acknowledge anything that had happened in the past. And they did a really good job of familiarizing new viewers of what they were. So they didn't have to go into this whole past backstory. But again, it goes along the same lines of those of us that were in the know went, ooh. And for those of, that didn't, it was still enough evidence there to allow them to understand what was going on there as well. So I think it can be done. I think it has been done. We've had the Zygons come back. We've had a lot of different Doctor Who villains and monsters come back without having to say, with just a throwaway line that the Doctor knows who these are and he's encountered them before. So I think that they could do this in this instance, but I'm kind of leaning towards what you guys were saying also about.
Which, let's be honest, I mean, the Doctor says, oh, yeah, I know about these guys, even when he doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. Right. Even when they introduce brand new characters.
Yeah.
In 6 years of TV, they're brand new. He's going to go, oh, I've dealt with them before. Like, okay.
That's a good point.
I'm really torn. I'm glad to be talking with you guys about Meep the Meep now that we've read the story, because my first instinct was to go to talk to Mel and say, okay, so there's this thing, and he turns out but then I thought, well, if this episode is a retelling, I don't want to spoil that for him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You know, so.
But how many people, maybe that's why, Keith, you said there hasn't been a lot of fanfare about it. And maybe they are keeping it sort of on the, let's let the longtime fans fanboy over this and get excited and let them have their piece. But we're not going to do much about saying this is a past character or this is, because what's the first thing somebody might do is they might go back and look at the source material and then they have spoiled it for themselves. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that might be why there's not been a lot of fanfare.
I mean, it would be the equivalent of, going into the new Marvel movie going, well, I read this issue.
Yeah, right. It's a little different because those worlds don't necessarily cross over, but yes, you're right. And this technically was a Marvel story. Even when it was in Doctor Who magazine, it was still being printed by Marvel.
Stanley Presents.
Yeah.
Stanley Presents.
Well, yeah, I
just was long.
Reading this, and it's been a long time coming, because I just have grazed through Beep's story and never really delved in and read this story in a whole. So I was really glad to read it. I'm kind of glad that we're getting a taste of classic Doctor Who history now, and then we're going to see how we tie it into the new series. It'll be fun to see, no matter which way they go with it. I think it'll be fun.
And it's one of those that I think it's fairly obvious tonally right from the get-go that it's kind of a farce.
Yeah.
When the Doctor's looking for his maracas, and I'm terribly sorry. I didn't mean to pull your eye and push it or twist it, or the twist was maybe a bit much. And so you just kind of know it's like, all right, well, this is what we're in for. And I actually did them. I started in reverse order. I started listening to the audio first before I picked up the book, and then got, I don't know, about probably 3/4 of the way through the audio, and then went and picked up the comic and caught up. And then for a couple of pages, I was actually doing it like a book on record, where I was, reading along. When you hear the beep, turn the page. But then it diverged a little bit enough that I couldn't read and listen at the same time. So I had to put it down.
You put it down and listen a little bit, and then you pick back up. Yeah, it's funny that you did that, because we talked about last time when we related it to those books on record when we were talking about Iron Legion as well. So
yeah. I really wanted to do that with this one, but it diverged just enough that I was like, damn it. I can't make it work.
It's a long beep.
Yeah. When you hear the meep.
Oh, they'd have done that too if they ever adapted this.
Oh, yeah.
They totally said, when you hear the meep. And then he would have went, meep, and that's when you turn the page. I think that I got a little bit of this from the wiki, but I thought it was interesting enough. And people in the UK, at least old enough to remember or know her, and maybe even young people know her, I thought this was kind of an interesting thing. The newsreader in the comic is modeled after the news gal. She's modeled after the contemporary newsreader Angela Rippon. And Rippon herself is the one who plays the newsreader in the audio adaptation. So Rippon was a real life presenter on radio and television in Southwest England before moving to the BBC One for the 9 o'clock news. And she became a regular presenter on there from 1975. So she would have been been a news reader probably in 1980, and they modeled that character after her for the comic. And then in turn, Big Finish got her to come in and read the newsreader role. I think that's kind of a neat little connection.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Was there anything else on this one we want to chat about, discuss?
So I debated whether I wanted to bring it up, because as I was listening to the story first, and the doctor calls out for Canine, and he's not there. And I was like, okay, that does two things. One, it kind of helps me place where the story is taking place within the doctor's timeline. And two, it gives me something to needle Keith about because, Canine wasn't there. So then I pick up the comic and start reading, and Canine's there.
Yeah.
And he's totally there, and he's playing whatever the game is. And I'm like, oh, man, I bet Keith loves the comic way more than... And it was at that point that Canine got his head knocked off. I was like, oh.
Nope, Keith does not love the comic more.
Maybe I won't bring this
I gotta find it interesting that you guys went audio adaptation before reading the comic in most instances. Sean, you were kind of doing both, but it sounds like the audio was forefront in that situation anyway. So
it was a matter of convenience for me.
Sure.
I
honestly
wanted to listen to, and my phone wasn't connecting to the internet, and that's what was on my phone at the time.
Yeah, honestly, same. Normally, I wouldn't do that, and my OCD is such that I would have to take whichever medium came first and do it in that order. Which is the same reason we always review things in doctor order.
Right.
I think just because we're all kind of that same mindset.
Yep.
But this time it just happened to work out that, well, the audio's here, so I'll go ahead and start it, and I'll get to the book later.
That OCD is what forced me to read the comic before I listened to the audio as well. So I'm right there with you.
And I also know it takes longer, to listen to the comic or listen to the audio. So it doesn't take me long to read the comic at all.
Yeah.
Real quick.
We're talking about K9. One more little behind the scenes, and I think I got this from the wiki as well. But I guess David Gibbons in the comics drew K9, and I went back and looked, and you can tell he drew K9 smaller than K9 actually is on the television series. And the reason he did that is so that the doctor could easily pick him up and carry him under his arm when necessary. I thought that was kind of an interesting little tidbit as well.
They shrunk K9.
Now I want to do a whole story where K9 gets miniaturized and lost in one of the doctor's pockets.
You're asking when this is placed, and it definitely is after Romana. And the reason I say that is because he says that he would rather face the Black Guardian again rather than have a mortgage.
Well, and there was some reference, can't remember if it was in the comic or the audio, about the randomizer.
So but the comics, and of course this also would have been after Leela, but the comic, and I can't remember without pulling it up, makes a Leela reference, but I cannot remember what it was. So it definitely is after Leela and after Romana. So it's after he's probably left Romana with the lion people in the E-space.
Although that's a slight contradiction since K9 went with Romana.
Well, that's true. But we know at some point.
Of course,
this might be the Mark
Sarah
4.
Jane gets a K9.
Well, that's just it. This may be the Mark 4 that he made for Sarah Jane and left with her.
Yeah.
So he could have had.
Although I want to say, was it in Iron Legion or was it Time Slip where he makes a reference? I thought he made some sort of reference that Romana was off doing something specifically.
That was in Time Slip because K9 was in that one too.
You're right.
But I can't remember what he said she was doing. So I don't remember it being off in E-space.
I bet you're right. In fact, I bet at the time that this is running in Doctor Who magazine, and we talked a little bit about this, I think when we talked about Iron Legion, and Sean was asking if perhaps, or for why they might have left companions out. But that might be what their explanation was for this time. This was probably running congruent to Romana on the show. And they probably had to make mentions like that in order to explain why he was traveling without her. So this probably is taking place around that time that he's traveling with Romana, but Romana's off doing something else when he's having these adventures.
Now, forgive me, I'm old. Did we, when we covered Iron Legion, did we cover at what time frame that's set? Or do we just talk about a lack of companions?
We speculated when it was, but I don't know if we landed on a definitive. I think I went to the Complete Adventures to see what, and I'm actually trying to go there now and see where he's got
because
Iron Legion.
Just on feel, Iron Legion feels like a Sarah Jane era Fourth Doctor adventure. Whether she's in it or not, it feels like it should slide into the earlier part of his run.
Do you think so?
I don't know why I feel that way.
Okay.
To me, it feels that way. But with K9 and the references here, this definitely to me feels like it's a later run, and yet there's only that one story in between them, and it's not like it's a long one. So I can't make that work in my head unless they're just jumping all over the place. But
Keith, were you trying to say this? I feel like it's very much in the vein of City of Death or Shada, or so I'm with you. I think it's more of a Douglas Adams feel, and so I think that's why I solidly place it in that era instead.
And I can make that work.
Yeah, Kearley has it squarely between television episodes, The Horns of Naimon, which would have been the last story. No, it would be between Horns of Naimon and the Leisure Hive, and I guess Naimon would have been the last one of that season. Leisure Hive, I think, was the first one of the next season, and he is still with Romana at that time. So yeah, this must
specifically Romana 2.
Yes, specifically Romana 2.
Well, and that makes sense because in the comics he also hasn't gone Burgundy yet.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a good point.
That's kind of why he has to go there.
I presume, and he's got a lot of he's got Shada in here as well. So Shada's actually, if we're gonna be fair and we count Shada as televised, even though it wasn't, it's between Shada and Leisure Hive. But he has sandwiched in a lot of stories here, and presumably a lot of these are probably the comic and prose stories, although there is some Big Finish stuff in here. But I guess so there's some of that Romana when he's with Romana 2 and that as well are set between those. We know that's been established. I don't think we've listened to him because I think it's season 5 that he's traveling again with Romana, or not again, but he's traveling with Romana. So yeah, we certainly know that some of those Big Finish take place in there as well.
So that certainly makes the Douglas Adams-ness of Iron Legion work as well.
Yeah,
If it's after Shada.
The wiki has a reference saying that the Doctor aside for the Big Finish, the audio says that the Doctor asides suggests that K9 and Romana are currently attending to business elsewhere. So the Big Finish didn't want to commit to anything. And makes it almost sound like it's after E-Space for the audio.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I read the way.
Well, and from their perspective, it does make sense because K9 is not there. Also, he keeps saying K9, but he keeps then realizing, K9's not here. So from I think the audio version of it, from that perspective, that's probably why they were placing it where it was, because they weren't about to bring John Neeson in for 6 lines.
Although, who wouldn't give their right arm to hear John Neeson doing K9 as a cat?
That bit in the comic was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. Agreed. That would be good.
I mean, that's worth your price of admission right there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
No K9. Woof, woof. Meow. I'm dying.
I could just hear the Doctor's voice doing that too. Tom Baker,
For the sake of my continuity, I'm going to go with the complete guide, and I think this is between Horns of Naimon and Leisure Hive, and I think when we get to the Meep archive, Adversary Archive, I think hopefully that will also cement it a little more, because I think those stories also take place in this space between those stories. So we'll see if they mention it in any of the future Beep the Meep stuff that we do.
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, and every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Alison Fitz-Seyfried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point podcast.
We do have more fun stuff coming up on the schedule. So, Sean, do you want to take us through the next steps?
Well, next up on the schedule is the next installment of Once in Future, The Artist at the End of the Universe. Returning to the Big Finish, Big Brouhaha for the 60th anniversary. We will also be taking a look at some more comics. This time it's the next 4 parts of Liberation of the Daleks, the ongoing 14th Doctor comic that Doctor Who Magazine is putting out. We'll get some more 60th anniversary tie-in materials on the next go-around with Doomsday, Hour 1, and Hour 2 through 5. Oh, yes. So the first 5 hours of Doomsday.
Yes.
Thanks. Could have... My hand length shorted out. I have to slap it and make a groaning noise to get all of the words in.
And you're doing that right, because that's sort of divided between 2 mediums, because the first one is Hour 1's from the website, and then Hours 2 through 5 are going to be is a set of comics in this month's. In fact, it just came out today, Doctor Who Magazine.
So we'll be covering those. And then the Beep the Meep Adversary Archive, as we tackle Star Beast 2, along with some various and sundry other materials. So lots of good stuff on the way.
Including an audio venture with the 6th Doctor in Beep the Meep, which predates this adaptation as well. So we'll talk about that as well.
I just want RTD to stop beating around the bush, man. Where's Frobisher?
I know, right? I mean, this gives you hope.
If the success of this, we'll get there. Then.
Right. I think I read somewhere, and I may be misremembering this, but I think I read somewhere that Dog Bolter, which is the Mafia Frog guy from some of the Frobisher stuff we've done, was considered for a story on television, and I want to say in the 12th Doctor's era, he was presented as an idea, and Moffat got really close to approving it, and then they decided not to go with it. So I think it was the 12th Doctor era. But so we almost got Dog Bolter, which would have been a closer connection to Frobisher.
That seems like somebody that River would hang out with.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
At least have ties with.
Right. At least have ties for her own convenience. It wouldn't certainly be because she condones or condemns anything he does, but out of sheer convenience for her purposes. Yeah, I think she certainly would hang around with him. I mean, she hung around with Dorian. She hung around, she had connection to those. So. Anyway, well, you can find us on our website, travelingthevortex.com, and get updates there. And if you get any value out of this podcast, please consider putting some value back into it. You can do that by clicking on the Patreon link you can find on the travelingthevortex.com website. Consider supporting us there. When you become a patron, you do unlock more audios and specials that we're putting up there for you, just for you, exclusive. So if you can even just give $1 a month, that completely helps keep the lights on. Also, please consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you subscribe to the podcast. It helps bump us up in the ratings and recommendations. And of course, you can find our listeners forum on Facebook, and you can find us also on Twitter. Anything else we need to talk about before we we're also on TikTok, by the way. Anything else that we want to talk about before we close this program? If not, until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
Thanks for listening. Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.
Direction point! Direction point!
A Doctor Who podcast network.